Hello everybody, I hope you're doing well. Today I want to share a few thoughts I had recently about learning tea and the learning process. So if you're watching these videos, I'm sure you're all learning about tea. You want to learn more about tea, to explore this universe. So people say practice makes perfect, and I disagree with this statement. Actually, practice makes consistent, but there are many things that we practice every day and yet we're not great at it. For example, cooking or playing video games. We've done that for thousands of hours and it doesn't mean that we are masters at this. Those who are masters at these things, it's because they have learned, they have kept learning all the way. So practicing is not enough usually. In order to improve your skill, you have to learn it. That means putting some effort into it. So most of the time, we only practice drinking tea. We brew tea without caring that much about how we brew it. We've just learned a technique. We have developed a technique, perfected it a little bit, but it doesn't mean that we're always really involved in that process of brewing tea. Okay, we just do it as a habit. And I'm the first one to do this actually. Most of the time when I'm brewing tea, I'm not really thinking about how long I should brew it, how I should pour the water in the teapot, how I should do this and that. Now if you want to improve this skill of brewing tea and appreciating tea, well, try to focus. You don't have to do it at every session, but sometimes if you feel like it, just take a pause and be mindful about what we're doing. I know this term of mindful is a bit cliche, but actually, yeah, that's maybe the most accurate description I can find. It's being mindful of what you're doing. That's the definition of Gong Fu actually. Gong Fu means doing things with a purpose, with an intent. So, for example, when I'm pouring water here, well, I'm going to try to focus on the flow of that water and where I direct that flow. And is it like a laminar flow or a turbulent flow? You see, if I increase the height, it gets turbulent. If it's like this, it stays laminar. You can do all kinds of tests. What tastes better, or what do you like better? Most of the time we just don't ask ourselves this question. Personally, I like when the flow stays laminar, like you can't hear the water flowing down. But it's really a matter of personal enjoyment. Now, before you drink tea, just take a second to smell the fragrance, smell the cup, then take a sip and slowly enjoy it. Try to notice what's happening in your mouth. There's a lot of things happening. You get a lot of complexity, and most of the time we miss that complexity, maybe because we're just watching TV or we're talking with friends. But when you have that opportunity to get a session alone and you have the energy to put into it, to put into focusing, please do it. That will, on the long term, improve your enjoyment of tea. Because once you've acquired these skills, then it will become second nature. And you'll be able to notice much more, many more things in your teacup than before. Also know that there is no end goal in learning about tea. It's not like learning medical science to become a doctor or learning about law to become a lawyer. You don't get a degree in the end, you know. So. Well, that's what makes tea interesting. I think tea, well, people who enjoy tea, who enjoy learning about tea, are natural learners. They don't do this because they have an objective in the end. It's really more like learning about philosophy. You know, you can study it you can study it for your whole life, and in the end you'll be like anybody else. You won't have any qualification that says that you master this skill of brewing tea, of tasting tea. And over the 10 years that I've been learning about tea, I've noticed a pattern. I think that the most important thing that has helped me in my life by learning about tea is to learn that kind of persistent perseverance in learning. Okay? Tea is really hard to understand, really hard to master, and you often get frustrated. It's not really like learning mathematics. When you learn mathematics, what you learn in primary school is still true if you take a PhD in mathematics, right? It's like a consistent improvement on your knowledge. But when you're learning about tea, sometimes things that you think are true as a beginner, well, the more you drink tea, the more you notice that truth is more complex than what you thought. And that pattern, so yeah, here is the pattern. Like first you learn, let's say, okay, Jingmai tea has an orchid fragrance. That's what you read in the books, what people say. So you drink a Jingmai tea and it has that orchid fragrance, and you say, okay, so Jingmai tea has this orchid fragrance. Now, as you acquire experience, maybe you'll have tried 10 or 50 different Jingmai teas, and you'll notice that the truth is more complex than this. Some of them have an orchid fragrance, some of them don't, some of them are bitter, some of them are not. So you're going to try many Jingmai teas, and maybe after you've tried like 50 or 100 of them, you will start to have a better understanding of that area. Well, will you? I'm not even sure actually, because well, of course, like we're based in Jingmai, so we have the opportunity to try a lot of different places and be sure about where we got the tea from and things like that. That allows us to notice some patterns, some new things. So that means we acquire more knowledge about this area, but actually a lot of it still remains a mystery. And maybe you would give me a tea in a blind taste, and it is Jingmai tea, and I wouldn't say it's Jingmai tea. Maybe I thought it was from Wuliangshan, or I don't know. Even after many years and hundreds or thousands of teas, you know, you can still guess those things wrong. I think it's a myth, you know. It's well, when I started drinking pu-erh tea, I thought that in a couple of years I would be able to identify any producing area just by tasting it and giving many comments about any kind of tea I get. And well, when I started doing this, actually, I thought it was true. I thought I was improving on this path, because you would have several big producing areas, and I would try them, and well, I would guess right maybe 70% of the time, or I don't know, maybe 50. It depends on how many choices you have. But actually, the more you try like small areas, and then the more you understand that there's a huge diversity, and this diversity in taste is related to so many factors that it's really hard, it's impossible to have a definite opinion on a single tea. I know nobody who can guarantee 100% that this tea comes from that area, or it was processed in that way, because there are many factors that can influence, both in the growing conditions and in the processing technique. You know, like recently I tried, so you know, Iwu tea has a reputation to be quite soft, and I tried a tea and it was very bitter, and really I thought more about like maybe Laomana, some Bulong area, or maybe even that could be some Jingmai tea. And actually it was from Mahe, which is a village quite in the center of Iwu, and which usually doesn't have that profile. But this was like a single tree tea, or they just harvested a couple of trees, and maybe in that specific garden, well, who knows, maybe they got some seeds from somewhere else, and the genetics was different, or maybe some features in the geography created conditions that would allow that tea to be very bitter. But it was that kind of bitterness that is very pleasant. It's very strong, but it subsides, it vanishes very quickly. It's the kind of tea that you can brew very strong and it's going to be an explosion in the mouth, a lot of bitterness, but after 5 seconds all of it has disappeared. So recently this tea marked my mind because it's one of those sessions where your knowledge is put into question. I thought that all of the tea in Yiwu was quite soft, and I found out that it's not the case. Well, of course, this kind of stuff occurs on many occasions, but yeah, the pattern is first you think something, you learn something, you think it's true, and the more you dig in, the more you think it's not true actually, and then it requires a lot, maybe 10 times more knowledge to eventually form a new theory, and so you get a new concept, new knowledge, and you think it's true, and you get even more knowledge, you do more research, and you find out that even that knowledge is not true. So it would be like a building that you build, so first you build it with simple material and it builds quickly, and suddenly the building collapses and you have to build it again, but this time with stronger foundations. And that process keeps repeating over and over again. So that's an interesting thing about tea, but this is a concept you can apply on many skills in life, and understanding that what you're learning is not permanent knowledge. I think it's very helpful to give you a kind of grit. You can really be better at learning things, because you know that anyway you learn that thing, but that knowledge is only temporary, and the more you're going to learn, it will be part of the normal process of learning to be contradicted in your logic. Yeah, it's the one thing that I've learned about tea. It's more about learning about how to learn and how to persist in learning. And so so beyond that, there's no real point in learning about tea. It's a hobby, so you can just learn at the pace you like, like some people, well, maybe they just find tea, they drink tea bags, and someday they walk in a tea shop and buy flavored tea and say, oh, that's so great, that rose flavor, jasmine flavor, chocolate flavor, all kinds of different flavors, and they're really enjoying themselves. And maybe most of those people will stay up at this point. They won't dig really beyond that first layer of tea complexity. And I guess that's okay. They will practice that tea drinking flavored tea for the rest of their life, and it's okay. It's just that they won't be putting more effort into learning about tea. So that's why I'm totally opposed to snobbery in tea. I find many, including many poor tea drinkers, they feel like they are drinking a better tea than others, but it's actually, maybe it's a bit better in the general perception, but on the scale of tea, maybe the scale is 10, and you're at the scale 2, and other people are at scale 1 because they like flavored tea, and it really doesn't matter in the end, because you won't get a degree because you're good at pu-erh tea, right? So it's very important, I think, to not be snobbish about tea culture and what people like to do. I think it's also good not to push your ideas on other people, because maybe most people most of the time want to practice and don't really want to learn. And if you want to teach them but they don't want to learn, then they're going to get upset and you're going to get frustrated. and that's not the point of tea. The point of tea is enjoyment, of course. So well, if you're watching those videos, I guess you want to learn. Now, one thing you can learn about tea, which is maybe more like mathematics, is like tea techniques, like tea processing. And I found that as soon as I got into studying the different ways of processing tea, then my tea knowledge really increased on a more long-term basis, because then you learn about the basics. You learn like what's the purpose of withering, what's the purpose of frying tea, the shaching, or a yaoqing, like shaking tea. Well, those things tend to be more stable because they are based in science and not really in culture. You know, like how to brew tea, really, there's not much scientific support to say that this way of tea will be better than another. It's more about culture, how generally people enjoy tea, how a tea is grown and processed. Of course, it's partly based in science. Well, many tea farmers maybe can't really explain you scientifically, they can't give you the physical reasons behind their choices, but if you understand the theory behind what they do, of course what they do has a purpose. Okay, processing is the same. If you get a good general knowledge of processing, then when you see a tea, you'll get a better idea of how it was processed and what it will taste like. Tea classifications are a bit pointless, really. They are more part of culture. Yeah, a classification is just culture, you know, it's not really hard science. If you want to improve your tea skills, if you want to learn more about tea, and that's definitely not an obligation because tea is mainly a hobby, then try to do things with a purpose. Be mindful of what you're drinking. Yeah, when you drink tea, like, you can think, what kind of flavor is it? Do I have bitterness? How long does it stays in the mouth? Things like that. And if you do that often, that will help you improve. And that improvement, that learning process will get you frustrated sometimes. But if you're used to being frustrated, then in the end, it won't be a problem, and you'll be a better learner for all of your life. Well, I find that very similar to learning music, for example. You know, or learning a foreign language. It's really a matter of frustration. But I think in the end, that's why we like to learn stuff, because we are mildly frustrated and we can see our improvement, and that's pretty cool. So I'm gonna keep drinking this tea, trying to be mindful, and well, I hope you're doing great, and that you're having good tea sessions, and that you will learn more about tea in the future. Thank you. Goodbye.